Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this webinar. This webinar is an extension of our previous one where we launched our India Meets Britain Tracker Report on the 7th of May. And the idea was to have a session where we can talk a bit more in detail about the various opportunities that UK has to offer for Indian companies who are looking to invest, especially so in a post-COVID environment. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you find this session useful and interesting. We have got an excellent panel of speakers, and to follow that by should be a very interesting panel discussion with different speakers giving different perspectives on the whole India-UK corridor. For those who don't know me, my name is Chandru Iyer, and I head up business development for the South Asia group at Grant Thornton UK. And this webinar is organized by the UK and India firms of Grant Thornton Network in association with the Confederation of Indian Industries and the UK government's Department for International Trade. So we got an excellent lineup of speakers on this webinar, as I said. And the timing of this session could not have been more apt in the sense that we had the Chancellor of the Exchequer for the UK government yesterday giving his summer statement where he talked very much about how we're all in this together and are looking to do a bit for reviving the economy. So that's from the UK end. And then earlier today, a couple of hours ago, the Indian Prime Minister spoke at the India Global Week, where he very much talked about the important role that India will be playing in the global revival of the economy. So a lot of interesting pointers coming through just as we get together for this webinar. So I'm sure it should be quite an interesting and useful session. So without much ado, I'm going to get on with this session now. So let me invite my first speaker for today, my colleague from Grant Thornton India, Ms. Pallavi Joshi Bakru. Pallavi is a tax partner with Grant Thornton India and also is responsible for the UK-India corridor. So without much ado, Pallavi, over to you.
Thanks, Chandru. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Super. From all of us at Grant Thornton, a very warm welcome to you. And thank you for making the time to join us for this webinar. We all keep saying this is the new normal, but I sincerely hope that we can go back to our normal, where we would have ordinarily, shook hands, exchanged business cards, some pleasantries. And of course, we would have had the session, but we would have probably closed with a nice glass of wine in our hands. Well, we'll try to make up for some of that by having an interesting lineup of panelists today. Like Chandru mentioned, the topic of discussion is investing in the UK, opportunities in a post-COVID world. We are thankful to the Confederation of Indian Industries and UK's Department for International Trade for partnering with us on this initiative. India and UK are bound by strong ties of a shared history. The bilateral trade between the two countries is estimated at $16.8 billion as per the last collated data of 2018-19. Needless to add, services constitutes a significant part of the total bilateral trade. Cooperation between the two countries in economic and commercial matters at a government level is facilitated by JETCO, which is the Joint Economic Trade Committee, which gets feedback from the UK-India Business Council, the UK India CEO Forum, which focuses on some of the priority areas between the two countries and works towards getting favorable outcomes for businesses. UK is the fifth largest investor into India with a cumulative investment of $26.78 billion, which constitutes about 6% of all FDI into India. UK remains a top destination for investment from an India perspective, Brexit notwithstanding. A trend that can only be attributed to our historical linkages, our familiarity with the English language, the British institutions, the common law principle and dispensation of justice, and the ease of doing business in UK. Another unique feature of the India-UK relationship is the strong presence of an Indian diaspora in UK. Out of Britain's population of about 67.3 million people, Indian origin constitutes more than 1.5 million, accounting for the single largest segment of ethnic population. Prime Minister Modi has very warmly described it as the living bridge between the two countries. They have made valuable contributions in areas of academia, literature, arts, medicine, science, sports, industry, business, and not to forget politics. The present Parliament of UK has many MPs of Indian origin, and several Indian origin people have been awarded peerages to sit in the House of Lords. Indian companies have had an enduring relationship with UK and have made significant investments in the country. There's another Grant Thornton report which estimates that the wealth generated by the Indian diaspora in the UK is in the vicinity of £75 billion. GT India and GT UK have been working closely for more than 3 decades supporting the businesses in the India-UK corridor. One of the initiatives undertaken by Grant Thornton in this regard is to study the growth and success of Indian companies in the UK and highlight the top employers. Grant Thornton has developed the India Meets Britain tracker in collaboration with the CII that gives some very interesting highlights. This is the 7th year of our tracker, and we find that Indian companies continue to invest, grow, and expand in the UK despite various challenges and have a long-term outlook. I'm very happy to say that this document has now become a reference for all key stakeholders and those interested in the corridor, and the statistics therein oft get quoted. I'm not going to give you any more details of the report and take away the thunder from Anuj's presentation, but I sincerely hope that this would motivate more Indian businesses to explore UK as the next investment destination. I hope you all are going to enjoy the sessions today and have some interesting takeaways. I thank you once again for being with us and welcome once more. Thank you, Chandru. Over to you.
Thank you, Pallavi. You've set the stage for us perfectly in terms of what we are looking to achieve from this session. So thank you very much for your welcome remarks, much appreciated. Sets the stage perfectly for us to invite my next speaker, our keynote speaker, somebody who needs no introduction in India. He's a friend on the India-UK corridor. And just to set a bit of context to it, last month when we had the new British High Commissioner taking charge in India, and also at the same time, the Indian High Commissioner, the new Indian High Commissioner in the UK also took charge. Our keynote speaker also took charge of a new role in Mumbai as the British Deputy High Commissioner for Western India, and also Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for South Asia. Alan Gemmell, OBE, the British Deputy High Commissioner for Western India, doesn't need any introduction. As I said, he was the director for the British Council in India for a long time and also held a previous role with the Commonwealth unit of investment. So without much ado, can I invite Alan Gemmell to give his remarks. Alan, over to you, sir.
Good. Thank you. Look, I'm sorry. Wonderful to be here, colleagues. It's a very busy day for the UK-India corridor, and I'm absolutely delighted to be at the webinar today, recognising this brilliant product that Grant Thornton have once again produced. And many of you know that Grant Thornton have been at the heart of the UK-India relationship and UK-India corridor, spotting the opportunity of UK-India business way ahead of many others, and have been at the heart of many of our most important deals and mergers and acquisitions. And certainly we at the High Commission and in my department, the Department for International Trade, we're delighted to continue to have a very strong association with Grant Thornton and this brilliant product, which, as many of you know, we use throughout our time here. So I'm 4 weeks into the job, and I'm in Mumbai, and obviously there's an outbreak continuing here, and that is part of the context for our work. But in spite of that context, I'm incredibly ambitious for the UK-India relationship, and I'm ambitious because of all the conversations I've had to date with the leaders of businesses, senior business people in both countries, political leaders in both countries, there's a real sense of optimism for the UK-India relationship and the potential for that relationship. And this tracker really is one of the key products that gives us confidence in the health of the relationship and the opportunities within it. Our Prime Ministers want an ambitious partnership between our relationship, between our countries, and we're thinking about what that means for the rest of this decade. Our Secretary of State for International Trade, my boss, has been in regular discussion with her opposite number, Shri Piyush Goyal at the Commerce Ministry, and that's leading up to a JETCO next week, at which we'll talk about market access issues and the opportunities for our countries to respond to COVID together. Those discussions have also been significant for the UK's response to COVID. So those discussions led to the export of 3 million paracetamol tablets from India to the UK, as well as the export of 10.95 million masks to the UK. They were also helpful in securing access for some of the UK's leading companies who needed to get their key workers into their offices in the midst of the lockdown here to ensure that elements of the UK's critical infrastructure continued. So we're incredibly grateful to the Government of India for the partnership that we have, but also to businesses in both countries and our partners on the line today, including CII, for keeping business and economic activity going at what is a difficult time. But as I say, I'm ambitious for the partnership and the relationship, because we've seen incredible innovation at the heart of the response to the COVID outbreak. And that includes, as you'll have seen, a brilliant announcement, a wonderful announcement, turning our ambitious partnership into a generous one between AstraZeneca, the Serum Institute, to make 1 billion doses of Oxford's drug, and 400 million of those available by the end of 2020 potentially, focusing on low and middle income countries. And that's a great example of innovation between our countries and our businesses, but also the generous spirit and the force for good that we want to represent. For me, the innovation in the partnership goes from farming to financial services. And if you saw our announcement recently or last week, it's even gone interstellar potentially, as the British government, in an innovative way, worked with Bharti Global to acquire OneWeb. So I'm saying now that our partnership goes from the soil to the stars, and every layer in between. And that's an incredible spectrum for opportunity for our relationship. But we're here in particular to talk about the great product that Grant Thornton have, the tracker, and what that tells us really about where the relationship is and helps point us in the direction of where it should go. So I'm sure you've read it, but we note that there are over 100,000 jobs attributable to Indian investors, including half outside of London, 11.7 billion pounds in Indian bonds in the London Stock Exchange. The UK is the third largest destination for investment from India, accounting for about 12% of India's total overseas investment in 2019-20. And lastly, that the combined revenue of Indian companies in the UK has grown by 87% in the last 5 years. So we have some of those stats in part because of the tracker and the work that Grant Thornton is doing, but also, of course, by the work that brilliant businesses in both countries are doing to spot opportunities, to spot trends, and really to turn that into new economic activity. As I said at the start, I'm incredibly excited about the opportunities in our partnership in sectors from health, food and farming, through chemicals, services, areas where there are real opportunities to innovate and bring a new dimension to the UK-India relationship. I hope that when you need to, you know that there's a significant Department for International Trade presence across India, and I think one of my colleagues, Laura Demetrius, is talking later today. We're a resource for companies in both places, really, to explore opportunities, to keep trade and business flowing, and to really turn this ambitious partnership into one that we can all be proud of over the next 10 years. I'm incredibly grateful to be here today, and I look forward to continuing this long-term and esteemed partnership with Grant Thornton and many of you. Thank you for including me this afternoon.
Alan, thank you very much. Really, I think your words mean a lot for us, and to have a friend of India on this corridor to look after the trade and investment relationship between the two countries is absolutely amazing. And we, as I said, we at Grant Thornton look forward to working with you, Laura, and the rest of the DIT team in making this happen. So yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate that, Alan. I think we got the UK side of the story. I think we also need to hear the India side of the story in terms of what the Indian industry thinks about it, and what an existing Indian investor in the UK thinks about it. My next speaker is the Vice Chairman of Jetline Group of Industries, and some news that I just picked up out of the press yesterday that Jetline Group is looking to invest more in the area of digital gaming and digital entertainment and the whole area of social media as well. So good news coming through. I'm going to invite my next speaker, Rajan Navani. Rajan also represents CII and is the chair of India at 75 initiative of CII. So without much ado, Rajan, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Chandru. Pleasure to be here, always with you and with CII, and on such a subject that you have been championing for so many years. As Alan said, I think you've become like the standard of what represents UK and India in terms of business and relationship. And I think the opportunity that lies ahead for our two countries is what really excites me the most about what we can achieve together. Of course, these have been tough times. I think for people around the world, it's like 9/11 has hit the entire world at the same time. But I think despite this kind of challenging times, I think the kind of collaboration that I've seen around, in many areas. And of course, I'm currently in Pune and with Adar Poonawalla Serum Institute and with the Oxford team, we've been engaged for the past several months actually in discussions. And really looking at how this, at a time like this, how our two countries and companies and academia and, industry can come together to really resolve and help create solutions for the world. I think, there's a great example right there, that at a time of a crisis, countries like India and UK, where there's a lot of familiarity, with English, with, I think, UK institutions, the ease of doing business in UK kind of attracts and makes this partnership really something which is, can be grown very, very aggressively. And I think it could be a defining relationship, of the 21st century, especially the bilateral relationship. But I will talk a little bit about, our initiatives in the digital space in UK since you raised it. We've had a historical presence in UK for over 5 decades, where initially we were using UK more as a base for us to invest in Europe and in overseas markets, in different kinds of asset classes. But over the last 5 years, we have started to build, operational businesses in the UK. And I think what we have found is that our platforms on the digital side have specifically seen tremendous amount of traction. Again, as I said, there's an understanding which somehow comes naturally to many people who are building digital products for the world. Having gone through a British style education in India, understanding different nuances of things. I think we're able to actually build a pretty interesting products, for the UK and London market. And one of our platforms, which is actually a recruitment matching AI-led platform that is actually connecting jobs with job seekers in the city of London, and today leverages a lot of new technologies to make that happen, has seen significant growth. I mean, if I were to say, of course, from a much smaller base, year-on-year revenues for the month of June last year to the June this year have grown about 400%. So that clearly shows, the adoption of digital, the fact that there are smartphones in the hands of people in UK, and they're using that to to do everything that impacts their daily life. And I think that's where, our group company Jet Synthesis comes in, where, we look at what are the ways in which, people can leverage digital for impacting not only their services and other aspects of their daily life, but also, a lot from the entertainment side, which is where we are, pretty strong. And what we've seen in the COVID period, that people are, locked down, so they're consuming a lot of data. So things like gaming, we have a whole OTT platform and gaming division business also operating out of the UK that also caters to different markets in EU. Our esports initiatives out of the UK have all seen tremendous traction in this period because people have been locked down, and we are seeing a lot of consumer side behavioral change that is very positive. I'd also like to say that the impact of COVID, and I think it was also said earlier, will result in a new normal. The challenge is really what is that new normal going to be, and when are we going to see that? I strongly believe that certain behavioral changes, like if we see our consumer today, the fact that contactless experiences are going to be the norm going forward, I think is a given. Now, within that world, within that kind of a space, how do we look and reimagine many, many things, right? Look at education, schooling, and for us, we look at entertainment, there are no cinema halls and, different kinds of things that will get impacted, multiplexes. There's so many challenges, restaurants, and we are seeing innovations that are happening. The idea is really to see how these can be strengthened and leveraged, because consumer behavior, once it starts to move in a particular direction, if there's enough fuel that is given to that, I think it can, really escalate significantly. And I think therein we find a lot of opportunity for us to come together. We are working with some large UK-based IPs, in the entertainment world, who want to find new forms of storytelling and content that goes out to consumers. So I think the opportunity for our two countries to do a lot more is definitely there, particularly in new age technologies. We have a business-to-business division that works in AR and VR, and we actually work with one of our clients in India who has installations in the UK, and because of the lack of travel during this period, we use an AR solution to complete the installation completely remotely, right? And I think so the idea that these technologies can eventually become not only very efficient, because it will not require people to move a lot between our two countries. And I think at a time like this, when countries are looking inward and we're seeing a lot of things happening, digital doesn't need any boundaries to really move across. As long as we are able to jointly as governments address the needs of how data is treated, what are data privacy, and all of that will evolve. But I think the opportunity, therefore, in a remotely connected world, again enhance the the fact of the things that we can do, both as countries, and as businesses, together. I think there is also a very large opportunity in the area of global recapitalization. I think there's going to be a lot of recapitalization happening across businesses and around the world. And I think in that space also there is an opportunity for India and UK to come together, not only in the interest of both of our countries, but also see how we can come together and address issues around the world. So overall for me, I think while there are challenging times, I think in these periods is where you also can see opportunities for business. The way we are having this event today, what we rightly said, the Prime Minister spoke this morning, the ability to continue the relationships between our two countries clearly shows that, there is a huge need, huge demand, and it is up to industry and others to see how to continue to accelerate that. I think the strength, of India's youth and, the startup ecosystems and, acceleration in AI and robotics and so many other areas, I think can benefit significantly as we continue to move forward. And last but not the least, I think Alan touched upon it. I think, even between our two countries, how do we really innovate on the policy front? How do we really innovate when we talk together on global issues. I think there is an opportunity even for our governments to be open to innovation in a completely new, normal, transformed world, which I definitely believe will get a big jump. We might, come back to some aspects of what it was pre-COVID, but we'll definitely be in a very changed world. So while one does look at all the challenges today, I think if you focus on the opportunities, a lot can be done. Thanks. Back to you, Chandra.
Rajan, thank you. Thank you so very much. And I think your optimism is absolutely contagious. And hopefully we can all take a few clue from all that you just mentioned and put things into practice. You mentioned about areas about digital technology, scope for recapitalization, and all of that. I think you hit the nail on the head. And it's, a lot of people say it's quite a cliche thing, but I always like to say that the lot of C's that connect India and the UK, so that's cricket, curry, Commonwealth, and of course commerce, and that's what we are talking about today. So I'm quite optimistic that as we come out of this pandemic, a lot of the opportunity that you mentioned, I think there's a lot of scope on both sides of the corridor to do a lot more in that space. And your point about moving over and above the policy side and putting things into action, I think that's quite relevant as well. Thank you very much, Rajan, once again. So we got the UK side of the story, we got the India side of the story, but stories are one thing, but how do the facts and figures stack up? Do they actually stack up? How do the numbers look like? So my next speaker is going to put things together in place in terms of talking about the numbers. And my colleague, Anuj Chande, corporate finance partner and head of the South Asia group at Grant Thornton UK. Anuj has been working on this corridor, and without giving his age away, and he doesn't look the age, he has been working on this corridor for over 35 years, and he has been with Grant Thornton family for 35 years, and he has done a lot for this corridor. So without much ado, I'm going to invite Anuj to share with us the findings of the India Meets Britain Tracker Report, which is his baby, and we are into the 7th year now, and as Anuj would say, the numbers don't surprise us at all. Over to you, Anuj.
Thank you, Chandru. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And thank you also to Alan and Rajan for their very kind words and about our involvement in this corridor and for the report. And also for the opportunities and challenges that both of them have referred to, and the perceptive way that they both spoke. So thank you both for your contribution on behalf of all of us here at Grant Thornton and CII. Before I actually get into the report and into the findings, Meghna, if you just put forward the first slide. I thought it'd be useful to just give you a bit of the genesis and context of this particular report. As you've heard, Grant Thornton's been involved in the UK-India corridor for nearly 3 decades. And over the years, we've been involved in 400 M&A transactions with a sort of combined value of about $4 billion. The largest transaction we've been involved in was the Tata Motors acquisition of Jaguar Land Rover. But over all these years in which we've been advising Indian corporates on investing into the UK, either through acquisitions or through REITs, we kept on coming across this comment that yes, there's a lot of Indian investment there. We had obviously FDI numbers coming in from UKTI, DIT now, but nobody actually could quantify what was actually the total economic footprint of Indian companies in the UK. You had a lot of hearsays. You obviously heard about some of the bigger names like the acquisition of British Steel and Jaguar Land Rover, but nobody could really pinpoint the numbers. So it was in 2014, I thought, well, I think let's try and quantify the economic contribution. So together with our global research center that we have in India, we decided to undertake some research, and we approached CII to basically collaborate with us as our partners in producing a report which would show the economic footprint of Indian companies in the UK in terms of their contribution to the economy, both in terms of revenues, taxes, capital expenditure, and employment. And that's the genesis of what we now have today, which is the India Meets Britain tracker report, which is produced in collaboration with the CII. As you've heard already, this is now the 7th year for this report. And as you've also heard, it's become the reference point and something which many people look forward to getting the results of this report. So as Chandru had mentioned earlier, we launched the 7th edition of the report on the 7th of May this year. We had to do a virtual launch clearly because of the conditions, the pandemic that we were facing. We were very honored to have the recently appointed Minister for Investment, Lord Grimstone, who is no stranger to the UK-India corridor, who was at the launch. We were also honored to have our Director General of the CII, Chandrajit Banerjee, to be at the launch in terms of launching the report. And also honored to have Ruchi Ghanshyam, who is the former Indian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. I believe Mrs. Ghanshyam and her husband are joining the webinar today, and I welcome to you both, and thank you for participating in this. We were also fortunate to have present at that webinar Baroness Prashar and Lord Poppet, who I believe are also on the webinar. So welcome to you both as well to this webinar. And I hope you will find it interesting. It's not just a repeat of what you saw or what you heard on the 7th of May, and there is a lot more content and discussion taking place here. So welcome to you both again. If I don't move on to the actual, Meghna, if you go to the next slide. If I move on to the highlights of the report. And many of you will have seen these figures anyway, but let me just repeat them for those who haven't seen them. There are actually 842 Indian companies in the UK presently, based upon our research. This number is the same as, exactly the same number as last year, but if you'd actually drill down to the actual numbers and the numbers of the individual companies, you actually find that there were actually 68 new companies that entered the United Kingdom to invest in the United Kingdom. And that was matched equally by 68 companies which were either sold or restructured or actually wound up their operations. In terms of combined turnover, they generate 41.2 billion of annual revenue per year, and they employ, as Alan had mentioned earlier, over 110,000 people. What's also interesting is that in terms of contribution to the exchequer, just in terms of corporation tax alone, they contributed this year 462 million of corporation tax. If you were to add all the other indirect taxes, you would get into billions and billions of pounds that they contribute to the exchequer. The number is slightly down from last year, but it's around the £500 million mark if you look at the last 3 years. Another thing that we look at tracking, and which is quite relevant in this day and age, is that we look at the gender diversity of these Indian companies in the UK. And what we have found is that 20% of the Indian companies in the UK, the 842 companies in the UK, 20% have at least one female or one woman on the board. And this compares actually quite favorably to the Nifty 500, where the similar statistic is actually 16%. So that's very encouraging. What I'd now like to do is move on to a part of the report, which is that we look at tracking the fastest growing companies in the UK, Indian companies in the UK. And in order to meet the criteria, you have to have a turnover at least £5 million in the UK and to have grown by at least 10% per annum, which I think in this day and age is 10% is a pretty remarkable achievement in itself. Meghna, if you could move to the next slide. So this year's tracker identified 72 companies which met this particular criteria. On a combined basis, they generated 3.8 billion of turnover. And if you look at the average revenue growth across those 72 companies, it's 40% if you exclude the outliers. If you actually include the outliers, it's 49%. So again, a pretty amazing statistic there. by any means. I mean, to have an average growth rate of 40% is pretty impressive. What I thought would be useful also for you to get is a picture of the size of companies which compose this 72. So you've got just under half which are between the 25 to 250 million category. You've got just under half also which are less than 25 million. And then you've got just under about 5% which fall into the category of over 250 million. So if I would then I'd like to now perhaps drill down into looking at what sectors are represented by these 72 companies, which in a way match the overall representation of the 842 companies. Meghna, would you move to the next slide, please? So in terms of sectors, really the top three sectors, and this has been sort of the picture over the last 7 years, is that you've got technology with 38%, which is well in excess of the second most popular sector, which is pharmaceuticals and chemicals, and then engineering and manufacturing. What's interesting is that in 2014, when we first started the first report, technology and telecoms represented 32%, and consistently it's been the top sector. And we certainly do see it retaining that position. But perhaps what may change slightly is its mix up. It's mix, which I will talk about later. In terms of pharmaceuticals and chemicals, that's 15%, and then you've got engineering and manufacturing at 14%, with then 11% business services, automotive, and energy. In terms of energy, I just want to really emphasize that actually the fastest growing company this year on the tracker was in fact a company called EESL Energy Pro, which is actually owned by Energy Services, a public sector organization, and we are delighted that the managing director of that company is with us today on the panel, Mr. Saurabh Kumar. And welcome, Mr. Kumar, to the panel, and thank you for participating. It's amazing that their company achieved a 715% growth, which was obviously through inorganic growth, but it's quite an achievement. And they are poised for further growth in future years to come. It's interesting that energy has become an emerging sector. We see that growing a bit more. Equally, on the panel today, we have Rahul Mechandani from Aries Agro, and that's another sort of new sector in nutritional products, which is a new emerging sector. So I think over the years, we will see emerging new sectors coming into this mix here. But we do continue to see that technology and telecoms and pharma by far will still very much be there. I think engineering and manufacturing, I'll talk a little bit more about that later on as well. If we can move on to the next slide, Meghna, please. So just in terms of location, and this is the case even back in 2014, London and the South, and particularly London, was still a predominant area for investment by Indian companies. So just over half of the Indian investment last year, or the Indian companies on the tracker, are actually in London. And this is probably a reflection of technology and telecoms being the top sector. I think over the years, we will see more and more of the, particularly as engineering and manufacturing companies invest into the UK, we will see more of the other regions come into play. And I'm sure the panel will discuss a bit more about talking about the certain of the regions. If we can, I'd just like to then move on to the employment footprint, please. Meghna, the next slide. So in terms of employment numbers, as has been mentioned previously, Indian companies employed over 110,000 people in the UK in the last tracker. But if you actually combine that, because we don't have the figures for all the branches, and many Indian companies do operate in the UK through branches. But we looked at the top 5 IT companies, which most of them operate through the branches. But you would find that actually, if you added the branches together, we'd probably have about 30 to 40,000 represented by the IT industry. So I think in total, if you included branches, we would estimate there's probably about 150,000 people employed by Indian investors in the UK. 13 of those companies have over 1,000 employees, employ over 1,000 employees, and they represent 85% of that employment footprint. Tata clearly is the major employer, and you've got JLR, which currently employs 44,000 people just in Tata Motors alone. As you know, the tech sector is a major sector for the Indian companies, so the tech sector naturally is also a major employer. We can move on to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to just try and drill down very quickly, I'm just conscious of time, drill down into the top 3 sectors. So if you look at technology and telecom, I mean, as I've said, that's the leading sector since 2014, and they represent 38% of the fast growth tracker. And I've just listed out some of the companies there in terms of Route Mobile, Dude Transmission, Evolutionary Systems, and they're all businesses that are fast growing and are expanding. Route Mobile has been on the tracker list for 2 years running. And you've got RateGain Technologies, which is a new entrant, and you've got Incessant as well. And RateGain, interestingly, is perhaps a reflection of the way technology mix is moving. It's moving away in terms of just being software service providers to being product providers, providing digital solutions to businesses. And RateGain is a prime example of such a company which provides digital solutions to the hospitality and travel industry. And we're particularly pleased that on the panel today, we have Sharmila Pranjpe, who is the country head of Wipro for UK and Ireland, is joining us on the panel, representing the technology and telecom space. So clearly there is this changing face of technology on the technology side. Meghna, if you could move on to the next slide. So in terms of pharmaceuticals and healthcare, as I said, is the second biggest sector. It's been in the top 3 sectors again since the beginning. New players have come in like Torrent Pharma, which I know is obviously a very big pharma company in the UK, has started small in the UK, but is expanding fast. And Accord Healthcare, owned by Intas, is something which is worth special mention because they've been in the tracker for all the 7 years, and that's been a combination of organic and inorganic growth. And I'm very pleased to see that they have consistently been on the tracker. I think what's emerged from the COVID crisis is that the Indian pharma sector, and it has been mentioned by both Alan and Rajan, is that Indian pharmaceutical industry has played a significant part in assisting the UK government with the COVID crisis. So both in terms of supply of paracetamol from India, but also in terms of looking at vaccine development for the COVID product. Lastly, if I just want to move on to the last third sector, which is engineering and manufacturing, which sort of swap places with pharma this year. They represent 14% of the tracker. Companies that you've got in this category include companies like Bharat Forge, which made an acquisition in 2018 of Teva Motors, but you've also got Mahindra itself that it was in manufacturing. Had acquired a business there called Stokes some time ago. But you've got companies like IFLG Refractories who bought Monocone as well recently, who again have been active and have been growing. And obviously, clearly, you've also got the links with the automotive sector, and previously you've had companies like Amtech also investing in the UK, apart from, of course, JLR. I think that sort of perhaps ends my discussion on looking at the tracker report. It's in perhaps a little bit more detail than we were able to do on the 7th of May, but I think it gives you a clear reflection of the fact that Indian economic footprint in the UK is very much here to stay. The sectors, the predominant sectors are very much cleared for people to see, but you see some new emerging sectors. And I think this sets a very good foundation for us for the next part of our discussion, which is the panelist discussion. So I'll now hand over to Chandru to perhaps lead and moderate the panel discussion. Over to you, Chandru. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuj. That was quite eloquently presented in terms of the facts and figures. And as the wise men say that the numbers never lie. So the numbers are there for everyone to see that despite all the challenges, despite all the concerns that people have had over the years, the Indian investment in the UK story continues to be a very strong story. And Indian investments in the UK continues to grow bigger and better over the years. So hopefully the next year, despite what we are going through currently, the numbers would hopefully still stack up, and we are here next year to talk about the 8th edition of the India Meets Tracker report. So thank you very much, Anuj, for that. Really appreciate that. As you rightly said, it sets the stage perfectly for us for the panel discussion. I love this part of the session because I'm going to be almost like a teacher asking the questions to my panelists and getting them in a tight spot and looking for great answers from them. So very, very quickly, let me introduce the panelists for you before we get on to the discussion. So in no particular order, my colleague Siddharth Nigam from Grant Thornton India, National Managing Partner, responsible for the growth side of the business. And we look forward to hearing from him on the Indian industry side of the story. Dr. Rahul Mirchandani from Aris Agro Limited, the Chairman and Managing Director. Aris Agro has been in the business, the agro-nutrient business for over 50 years, and Rahul is a potential investor in the UK. So we look to hear from him in terms of what he expects from the UK to make his investment story a reality. Next on the panel is a good friend, Sharmila Paranjpe, Vice President and Country Head for Wipro Limited for UK and Ireland. Sharmila has been in this hot seat, as if I can call it that way, for the last 2 years, and some interesting stories coming through from Wipro over the last week in terms of some new wins. So we'll be talking about that. Laura Demetris is next on the panel from the UK government's Department for International Trade, Deputy Director responsible for investment and marketing. Laura took over this role in Delhi in March, and in a very short period of time, she has hit the ground running. So we look to hear from Laura in terms of how DIT can support Indian investments coming to the UK in terms of identifying opportunities and handholding Indian investors. Next, but not the least, Lakshmi Kaul from CII, head of the UK chapter for CII. Again, a very, very dear friend. And Lakshmi is in a great situation because she represents the interests of Indian companies, but she's based in the UK and also is a big supporter of the various regions that that UK has to offer. So it's not just about London, but there are other regions too that Lakshmi is very supportive of. So look forward to hearing from Lakshmi. And as Anuj said, last but not the least, Mr. Saurabh Kumar, Managing Director of Energy Efficiency Services Limited. I'm very proud to say that I was instrumental in setting up Energy Efficiency Services Limited in the UK almost 4 or 5 years ago. And it's great to see that in this year's tracker report, ESL Energy Pro, one of their joint venture businesses, topped the list as the fastest growing Indian companies in the UK. So hearty congratulations to Mr. Kumar. Thank you very much, all my panelists, for taking your time out on this panel discussion, and I hope to make this an interesting one for everyone on this webinar. So my first question, I'm going to go to Siddharth really to help us set the stage. Siddharth, you've been in the professional advisory business for 25 years now. So you meet with Indian investors, Indian entrepreneurs on a day-to-day basis. So how do you look at the current situation we are in, and in terms of Indian investors looking to go global, what is the mindset? What are they looking at? And what can UK do to make their dream come true in terms of foreign direct investment? Over to you, Siddharth.
Thanks, Chandru. Pleasure to be here amongst very eminent panelists. The only person who doesn't do any real work out of the rest of the panelists. So I'll try and sound intelligent. So my background, Chandru, just set the context. I'm an M&A partner at the firm, so have been involved in a lot of cross-border transactions in the UK back in the day. I think Anuj talked about a few. In the current scenario, I think Indian businesses continue to be positive. I think that's what the Tracker survey also revealed. A lot of the entrepreneurs and businesses in India are looking at the current crisis as an opportunity to reset their global expansion plans. I think there's been mixed results out of Indian businesses expanding out of the country. Some have been good, some have not been that good. Now, how does that create an opportunity? Obviously, the level of distress in some of in the developed economies will get heightened, which will create, I would say, more attractively priced assets from an acquisition standpoint. It'll also require, some of the performance improvement, cost cutting, which I think Indian entrepreneurs tend to be more frugal and see the opportunity from a turnaround standpoint. The other thing that will happen is that I think the crisis will lead to is that the relative weightage of risk and quality versus price. So the other emerging opportunity that China plus one from a supply chain de-risking perspective. I think India is well placed amongst many other geographies, whether it's Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, countries in Latin America, Eastern Europe. But I think it has created a global opportunity where Indian businesses will be quite well placed to do that. So that's on the supply chain side. I think UK will continue to be a very, very safe destination for Indian companies from both aspects, as looking to buy into businesses which are British businesses that would help in their global expansion, but also increasingly use UK as a base to expand their geographic ambitions. So I think with the Brexit in a way is also going to playing a factor in that, on making the destination more attractive. I think that the government is also keen to attract a lot more FDI into the UK. And what was interesting was that India is the 5th largest FDI investor in the UK, which I was quite intrigued to find and pleasantly surprised to find that. So that I think shows that the opportunity will only get magnified, and UK is placed very favorably versus a lot of other geographies.
Siddharth, thank you. I think that helps to set the context. And if I can just ask you a bit more on that, just to dig deeper on this, in terms of, like you mentioned about the UK, but there are a lot of other options for Indian investor today in terms of looking outward. So in terms of the kind of steps that UK government is taking currently in terms of investment promotion, what more is something that a typical Indian client of yours would be happy to get more in terms of making their journey into UK a lot more smoother?
I think a little more broadcasting about the benefits. So, while we in a group, I would say, are quite well informed, but if you look at, the mid-market businesses in India, which is really the opportunity for them to look at expanding outside the geography of India, they are not that well informed. And I think with organizations such as CII, British High Commission, UKTI, I think there's an opportunity to broadcast those benefits, whether it's about lower corporate tax, it's about attractive SOPs on creating employment, an opportunity also to existing folks who are, I know, we've got Sharmila from Wipro, who are one of the bigger employers in the UK. Are they actually getting access to some of the benefits that the government is providing? Now, what that would do is, Sharmila, not putting you on the spot, but UK is home for most Indians. Language is a great advantage. It's Our law is based on British common law. A lot of other, historical ties. So what could have potentially gone into other English-speaking geographies or other European destinations? I think UK will gain on that. I think given a chance, every Indian entrepreneur, every Indian businessman would prefer to look at UK as the first choice, as somewhere to explore initially.
So, thank you. And I think that's a good cue for me to actually get in Rahul here, just to continue that discussion. So Rahul, from your point of view, from an Aris Agro perspective, I'm looking at you as a potential investor looking to come to the UK. Just hearing what Siddharth mentioned, is that something that you feel is something that's missing and you may want more in that area? And also in terms of the sector that you represent, it's an interesting sector, but it's not a sector that's talked about a lot more. So what can we all do more in that space as well?
Thank you, Chandru, and I must thank CII for this invitation. In fact, I perfectly agree with Siddharth in terms of, we need to understand more. As a sector, I know I had the privilege of actually being part and leading a delegation which came out from India, and Lakshmi was very instrumental in taking us not only to London, but also to Birmingham, Scotland, and many of the other parts of the country, just to explore the opportunities and see the reality on the ground. And frankly, when we came there, we did identify a lot of opportunities as an investor that we could look at. In fact, there were very detailed cost comparisons that were made for us in terms of setting up in Delhi and Mumbai versus in London, Birmingham, etc. And we had specific numbers that came out of organizations we met, like the CWEIC and also CII. And of course, ease of doing business, the low cost of capital, the fact that taxation is lower, UK as a gateway to Europe, I mean, Brexit or no Brexit, I think were things that we took away as great takeaways. And for us to have, maybe a offshore office where it can actually channelize investment, look at potential, very, very interesting models of actually functioning out of the UK, were actually became very interesting opportunities. Also, we looked at certain very important new developments that are coming out, where these could actually be set up. So, for instance, London City Airport establishment. For us, though being in London, it really opened our eyes in terms of understanding how a low-cost opportunity of setting up an offshore office could exist for a company like us in the MSME space to come into the UK and actually explore these opportunities. Of course, specifically to my area, I'm in the agriculture nutrition space. For us, we looked at the opportunity to enter the UK as a big white space today in the India-UK partnership. Now, when I say white space, it really is because you look at the innovations that are coming out of Indian agriculture. I mean, frankly, today, Indian agriculture is the North Star in terms of getting the economy back on track. I don't know if you're aware, but we've actually had a 100% increase in consumption of agricultural inputs in the last 3 months, 100% increase in land area under cultivation. Now, all of this is actually coming out because all the labor that migrated is actually now going back into cultivation. Now, all of this gives some great opportunities for food exports. It gives an opportunity for the Indian superfoods to come to the UK. It gives an opportunity for some of the phenomenally, quality-oriented Indian product, which are till today not branded well, like Indian tea, Indian wine, and getting them into the UK in perhaps the most appropriate manner. And this is the time when markets are going to look for new opportunities, simply because we've increased land under cultivation and production, but demand in India is not really shooting up consequent, in the same manner. So we would look at these kind of international opportunities, and I think that's one of the great areas there. Indian superfoods, Indian wine, Indian branded agricultural outputs. For me, those become great opportunities. Now, having a local office there, ensuring that we understand the regulation, making sure that people are, we have a team that actually is able to liaise locally and find these kind of buyers becomes interesting. Also, for me, in the fertilizer space, I think the entire market in Europe is today having significantly high cost agricultural inputs, whereas we in India are able to manufacture at a fraction of that cost, and we're able to provide a world-class product to the European market as well as the UK market. And I think that's again certain great opportunities. If you ask me for a couple of other sectors apart from agri and food, I would list healthcare and high technology. High tech and healthcare, I think, are other areas where we could kind of do a lot more for the India-UK collaboration. And we ourselves through CII and Young Indians is also looking at education-related dialogues, where we can get some of the best Indian minds and some of the best UK universities to actually come together and train young in business on both sides. And I think these are, great opportunities. As far as I'm concerned, I also used to head the Commonwealth Alliance of Young Entrepreneurs. In fact, I was its founder. The Young Indians of the CII, which is our youth arm, we have a network today in 53 countries as a result of the G20 and the Commonwealth partnerships. And I believe a lot of people on this group would actually use us very effectively to create that bridge between India and the UK. Because we're part of industry body in India, doing some phenomenal work in connecting businesses in the country. And we have young minds very, very hungry for growth, looking at such kind of opportunities, my company included, who could actually create this bridge between the India and the UK very effectively. And I certainly believe this is a time, like was said by Siddharth earlier, as a very positive time for Indian businesses. In agribusiness, we have emerged very resilient, very agile, and very hungry for opportunities across the world, where India can kind of take the best of India to the world and also get the world's best to India.
Thank you, Rahul. I think you hit the nail on head on quite a few areas. I think you helped us also identify some of the other areas where opportunities are there for us to take advantage of. So thank you very much for that. I think I'm also going to now get a couple of my panelists to talk about the success stories, people who have been there and done that. One who has been there for a very, very long time, Wipro Limited, and then of course ESL, one of the new entrants, but has done phenomenally well in a short period of time. So I'm going to go to Sharmila, you first. Wipro is a well-known name on this corridor. Wipro has been in the UK for a very long time. And yeah, just read news hot off the press. So congratulations, first of all, a couple of good deals you got with John Lewis and Eon. So all goes well for Wipro. Would like to talk a bit about the Wipro UK journey and how has it been so far for you on the hot seat?
Absolutely. So, Chandru, firstly, thank you to you and the Grant Thornton team, CII, DIT, for always being great partners and supporters for us. So we began our journey, Chandru, in 95. We started our first registered office in 95 in the UK. And to be honest, in the year 2000, I was based in the UK for 2 years from Wipro. And, I've seen the scale with which we operated then, which was a few $100 million of revenue, a small team, a small office in Houston Road. And we started our first development center in Reading for Thames Water at that time. And come today, when I became the country head, we had a spread of, we've today crossed over $1 billion in revenue. We have around 5,000 people. We have 10 plus offices come development centers. More importantly, in the journey, we've had 2 acquisitions in the UK. Designit is a Netherlands-based, a Danish company, but, headquartered in London. We've acquired an engineering firm in Cambridge. We've set up a digital pod in the heart of London at Shoreditch. So you see, we've come a long, long way. In addition to that, what I'd like to stress on, it's become the second largest country globally for Wipro. So to that extent, and all of this thanks to the collaborations, the government policies, the welcoming UK being easy on language and welcoming platform for youngsters, people wanting to come to the UK. There's always a push for teams wanting to move to the UK. So that has helped our business grow tremendously. Another interesting point is we are big on philanthropy, Wipro, mostly in India, but we expanded this to the United States about 4 or 5 years ago, and UK was the second country. And I say that because it's important for us to build into that economy and support that country as well. So we have started 2 CSR programs in the UK, both in STEM education with Sheffield Hallam University and King's College. So that has been, in my tenure, a very, very interesting phase for us to invest in the UK in CSR. So that's been our journey, and we see growth, which we will talk of even in the times to come, you know, whether it is Brexit, whether it is COVID, we still see growth and a lot of opportunity in the UK.
That's very, very promising to hear from you, Sharmila. Thank you very much for that. And I'm probably going to get to Mr. Kumar at this stage as well to talk about the ESL side of the story. Now, it's been a fantastic story at ESL for you, Mr. Kumar, in a very short period of time, the wonderful growth that you've had in this market. And it's been under your stellar leadership. So, Mr. Kumar, would like to talk about ESL's UK story, so there can be some learnings from it for the audience here.
Thank you for inviting me. Let me also thank Mr. Anuj for very kindly naming us in that tracker. You are right. I mean, we are very proud of what we have done in the UK over the last 3 years, and in a short period of time, we have been able to grow quickly, as you mentioned. The reason, I mean, if you look at ESL in the last 6-7 years, we've actually grown from a company less than $1 million to this year crossing nearly $400 million and presence in about 6 international markets and looking for more. So, and the reason why we reached out to UK and we did what we did in UK is to make sure that we have learnings from the UK. I mean, as many people say, many of the systems between UK and India are common, and energy and power systems are exactly like that. One of the things that if you look at India today, just about 7 to 8% people have access to air conditioning. Now, all reports which estimate that by 2030, if there's 30% ownership, household ownership of air conditioners, this country will need 150 gigawatts of incremental demand only to meet the cooling demand from there. And what interested us, therefore, is can we reduce this demand? And we possibly can. And that's how we started looking out to markets in UK for exactly the same reason that other panelists have said was the obvious choice. And there we have this company called Adina, which is one of the largest EPC companies in the combined heat and power space. And that's how we identified that. What is relevant, why it is relevant to us in India is that you have new commercial complexes being built. I mean, again, the number of buildings in 2030 that will stand, 70% of those are yet to be built. This is the time that you can actually intervene and reduce their load. So that technology here is called tri-generation, which is basically a decentralized generation by gas engines and utilizing the waste heat to provide for cooling and hot water. So this was the main driver, honestly speaking, and we've already started certain projects. The second main driver was looking at what is called the ancillary services market, which is basically a grid stabilization when you have more renewable energy. Again, these gas engines play a very, very pivotal role in the UK. It's called the STO, short-term operating reserve market. So these were the two key drivers, because we see a very, very large growth as far as these two elements are concerned in the Indian power sector. And just to round it off, we intend to continue investing in our business in UK, take it certainly back to India. And also we are opening markets in the GCC region as well, where again, gas and cooling is something which is extremely important. So once again, let me thank you, and thank you, Mr. Iyer, for facilitating our entry, helping us at the time, and also UKTI, which was also a great help to all of us when we started the journey.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar. I think it's been a great story. It's because the fact that ESL is part of a Ministry of Power, a public sector initiative, but to have this kind of a private sector mindset in terms of going international and going through the inorganic route of making things happen for you is absolutely phenomenal. And some of the areas that you mentioned is really, really good to see in terms of the whole aspect of how you're looking at energy efficiency in its broader perspective. So thank you for sharing those insights with you. I'll definitely come back to you with more questions. I'm going to get at this point of time get the two sides of the story from a trade organization perspective. So I'm going to ask Laura Demetris from DIT to share her thoughts in terms of, you're talking about opportunities now, Laura, for Indian companies. So in terms of sectors and also in terms of how does one look beyond London, Laura? Your take on that? Lakshmi, do you want to take that first in terms of the sectors and from a regional perspective, CII's take on it? I mean, you've been a big supporter of going beyond London. Of course, you stay in London, you love London, but you say there is a lot more for the UK to offer than just London.
Thank you, Chandru. May I first of all say namaste in the COVID style to everyone. Because of social distancing, we're using the Indian way of greeting everyone. And I'm absolutely delighted to see all of you here. And of course, our partnership with both the DIT team as well as the Grant Thornton team is almost like an extended family relationship. We do great things together. Chandru very rightly said, I do live in London, and I apologize that I do. I wish I could live everywhere else as well, but I do spend a lot of time in my normal life. I do spend a lot of time traveling around the regions, and very, very proud to sort of shout out to our two fantastic India partnerships that we sit on the board of. The Manchester India Partnership that has been running for over 2 years now, and the West Midlands India Partnership, which is a brand new India partnership that we've launched recently. I represent CII on both the boards, on the WMIPM, on the executive board. Why are these partnerships important? It's because exactly what Rahul talked about, whenever there are Indian companies coming into the UK, they want to know what are the opportunities. And you can see actually the chat messages are full of, companies sharing their own expertise, interests in what is, on offer from their end. And as rightly pointed out, both by Siddharth and earlier on, Alan and Rajan, the opportunities in the regions are not really communicated very well with the companies. So when you come into the UK, where do you go? So connectivity becomes a very, very critical entry point sort of issue and introduction to whatever is on offer from the UK end. And together with DIT, they have extensive network, both in India, with the Deputy High Commissioners in various locations, the extensive network that, we support them with on behalf of CII, Young Indians, Indian Women Network, and various other sort of, platforms that we provide for engagement on the grassroots level. There are a few things there. I'd also like to just do a brief tribute to CII and our journey of 125 years. We complete 125 years. And what a poignant sort of time to be celebrating 125 years as we re-look at priorities of industry and how we shape the growth story as we have done for these 125 years. A point was earlier on made on the policy front. Whatever interventions are going to be made at the grassroots level, at the investment level, at the business level, the policy plays a very, very important role in shaping that sort of direction. And Chandra, you paid a tribute to the Chancellor's, speech and announcement, and the government has been making active efforts to provide that kind of support, both in India as well as in the UK, to the businesses to make sure that they survive, they thrive, and they go on to keep helping the country grow and to help the economies grow. Sector-wise, I mean, Anuj made that presentation earlier on, and the reason why we track the investments coming into UK, and we will also be looking at the reverse sort of side of investments going into India from the UK side fairly soon. The sectors, obviously, in the UK-India context, the JETCO is upon us. I mean, the JETCO conversations will happen actively. And the key areas and key focus sectors identified within the JETCO scenario in the UK-India story: digital and data, food and drink, agriculture, life sciences, and healthcare. These are the three identified key focus areas currently. But having said that, there are other areas that are emerging that are fast sort of satellite areas that are coming out of these sectors. Pharma and chemical, of course. I mean, we're talking about data-driven healthcare, solutions. And India is a great example of dealing with it and responding to it. It's no longer India looking at UK, for support and help. Of course, that happens with friends always. But India also has a lot to offer to the UK by way of solution. And some examples were wonderfully stated and quoted earlier on. Financial services, business services, there are some, if you look at the statistics on the tracker report, some of these sectors that have a slightly lower percentage of coverage are really where the opportunities are. They're actually where the big opportunities for future are. So if you look at the hospitality sector, of course, that suffered immensely currently, but then that will, in future, we are hoping that that will grow. Coupled with tourism and travel, that will have a very, very positive impact, and there is huge opportunity there. I mean, the Commonwealth Games will be here very soon. So the next, couple of years, that's something that's a great opportunity for tourism and hospitality, right? Financial services, business services, engineering will always be relevant. Media, I mean, digital, you had Rajan Navani talk about, I don't even need to say it. Agriculture, food, everybody wants to eat healthy. Everybody wants to focus on their nutrition. So, I mean, Rahul's talked about that element of work as well.
The list is endless, as they say, isn't it, Lakshmi?
Absolutely. New materials are being invented every day. I mean, the north of England has research extensively, not just in life longevity, but also looking at new materials for research and production. So, I mean, it's really, you pick your, you make your pick. Whatever you do, there is an opportunity between India and UK. And India is not just Delhi and Mumbai.
And we all want our regular share of okra and Alfonso mangoes coming in from India all the time, isn't it? So,
and Rahul will give you a long list of what else.
I know. Thanks, Lakshmi. Laura, sincere apologies. I think you were muted at that time. So I think we got the technology sorted. So you are unmuted now. So yeah, Laura, the DIT side of the story, it's all over to you now. I think all the questions you need to answer now.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Chandru. Interesting to hear that shopping list, Lakshmi. I'm surprised that you didn't give me some things to bring over when I came from India this morning. So yes, I managed to get a plane. So there is a physical India-UK corridor that's open at this point in time, which is fantastic, I think. I just thought maybe, I'm sorry, Chandru, I'm going to go slightly off script. I'm on a very esteemed panel with some very long-standing Indian investors to the UK. So coming from the DIT side from government, I thought maybe we can talk about the enabling environment, because that's really what we can offer you as HMG. And obviously in the COVID context, there are some things that I think have been just moving at quite a rapid pace. So that's been really interesting. And Lakshmi just touched on that, because I know that CII is doing a fantastic job for its members in terms of advocating to HMG things that would be useful to the investor community. But the three things that I think really stand out, the kind of growing areas for the UK. I mean, number one, innovation. I think we are really committed to maintaining, but also investing in our future as a science and innovation kind of global powerhouse. I think it's something we absolutely share in common with India. I think you were talking about that, Lakshmi, in terms of, where is the innovation coming from? This is a two-way conversation. We're looking for where we can collaborate and where these things can come together and there's a commercial outcome. I thought it was, there's been some really interesting announcements this week and last week in terms of the 22 billion. Also that was announced by the Chancellor that we will be spending on R&D up until 2024-25. And that's actually the fastest ever expansion of support for basic research. Takes R&D up to 0.8%, and that actually puts us ahead of the USA, which surprised me actually, Japan, France and China. So I think we are moving somewhere where there's just a lot of mutual interest and benefit more than ever for our two countries. Not least some of the other things that we're waiting to find out about, the moonshots, DARPA, a lot of really interesting things. And not least, I think Alan referenced this and you referenced this, also coming out of this space, the fantastic collaboration on satellites with the OneWeb deal that's going ahead. So that's just, it's a brilliant thing that it really brings us closer together as two nations. I think other enabling factors that I think we've talked about, there's obviously the business environment context, and the UK has been trying to do as much as it can to support existing investors in the UK to make sure that your businesses remain resilient and ready to get back to business. And some of that work is continuing, and the Chancellor made some additional announcements on that yesterday. I know many of you have benefited from those schemes and you've welcomed them. We are always interested to hear from you, to hear from CII, to hear from others on where it's not working. We are here also to do some policy advocacy. So please feed back to us and where you need additional help or you just want to highlight things. And I think the last thing I just wanted to highlight was just the talent angle. Obviously, one of the big things that's coming up is the future points-based immigration system that's coming on board from the 1st of January. And that's obviously going to be prioritising skills that are really going to contribute to the UK's future economy based on that skill set rather than the source of it. So we're going to make sure that we streamline the visa process, and we're going to make that as easy as possible to get the widest pool of skilled workers that you need to grow your businesses in the UK. And that's what should be one of the reasons that you want to come and invest with us. I think a few other things, I didn't want to kind of overlap too much, I suppose, but there have been some fantastic stories that have come out of this kind of terrible time. But you referenced it, Chandru. I think also Alan referenced it as well. There's been amazing collaboration between the UK and India on PPE, some fantastic stories. I think my colleague Geeta, who's also on this call, we were just talking about the pendulum ventilator story the other day. Many different things that have happened that have really allowed us collaboratively to kind of address this very, very big challenge. So many thanks to India on that front, and to our long-standing commercial partners that we've been working with. I think the last thing I just wanted to say was, and I think you mentioned this at the beginning, Chandru, is about how you can get the most out of us. We are a cost-free resource to you as the investment community. Many of you know how to use this. I'm sitting on the panel next to people that we work really closely with, but I think there's a lot of people on this call who might be thinking, well, how's this going to work? How's this going to help me as I do some BD? And what we're really here to do is to help you think about, if you're thinking about making an investment decision, or you're thinking about pivoting away from a domestic angle, what does the UK have to offer? Where are our areas of sector strength? Where are the clusters? As you mentioned, where are they across the UK? And who can we introduce you to? We work really closely with the DAs, the regions. You also referenced, Lakshmi, the West Midlands India partnership. We have lots of people represented from these organisations and bodies actually sitting in our teams in India, and we pass information, we share things, we work on projects collaboratively. So we are trying to make sure that we work as closely with you to kind of invest in our kind of collective commercial and economic future. And if you would like to talk to us, or you'd like to work with us to look at what the UK can offer you, please do get in touch.
Thank you, Laura. That's very, very good pitch for DIT, I would say. And I think it's a wonderful work that you and your team are doing in terms of handholding Indian investors with their plans to come to the UK. And we look forward to working with you in making more of these success stories happen. I'm just wary of the time. There are a lot of questions coming through on the chat box. So what we're going to do is take all those questions and then hopefully we get them answered by the expert panelists on this. But in just the interest of time, I'm going to ask one last question to all my panelists. So it's again a very cliched question, but I think it makes a lot of sense. So I'll go with you, Laura, first, because you're there on the screen now. Is one do and don't, one golden advice in terms of for an Indian investor looking to come to the UK, what he or she should be doing, and what he and she or she should be not doing, should we say that way? Over to you first, Laura.
Thanks. I'll just focus on the do's first. Do engage with us early. We're here to help, as I said, and we can give you specialist advice, not just on looking at where you could have an opportunity where it makes sense in the UK, but we also have an absolute stable of advisors in-house on finance, on visas, on migration, on many different things. So get in touch with us early. Do familiarise yourself with all the support available. So all the COVID support, the business support checker tool, which is on the BAYS website, I think, all of those things, really, really important. So do those things. And I'm sorry, Chandru, I can't really think of any don'ts. So I'm going to hand over to somebody.
I'll leave you at that. Siddharth, do you want to go next in terms of one do and one don't for an Indian investor looking to come to the UK?
I think my do would be, again, wearing my M&A hat, is make sure you prepare and plan. don't take familiarity for granted. And my don't would be, don't go without Grant Thornton by your side. I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Well done. Sid. Thanks for that. Really appreciate that. Sharmila, over to you. One do and one don't for an Indian investor, and also from the angle of the changing face of the Indian tech sector, some of the new Indian tech companies with some fantastic stories looking to come to the UK. What would be your advice to them?
So, given the COVID situation, I think that it has created much more opportunity for the tech sector because companies are looking at digital transformation. So the market is still there and growing. And even if you take Brexit, that's going to happen, and I'll talk about the being careful part, but the market, the opportunity is going to grow. So we must continue to look at the UK as a strong market for every investor to grow in and reap the benefits of the economy. From a don't perspective, rather than a don't, I would say that one has to bear in mind and with caution. And the caution would be to understand the changing market given COVID and Brexit, because there would be changes. And it is important to understand that from each business perspective before you jump in. From a technology perspective, like Laura said earlier, for us, the flow of skills is all about our business, right? So having an open channel, and even with the points-based system, we have to understand the changes, the implications on our business. And Laura rightly said, we need to engage early with DIT or any body that you need to understand, but definitely continue to invest and look at the UK as a big opportunity.
Thank you, Sharmila. Really appreciate that. Rahul, over to you next. What are you going to do, or should we'll put it that way. What are you going to do, and what are you going not to do?
Well, I think the biggest do would be that the biggest don't would be don't forget the primary sector. Because we're in agriculture, and I think we tend to ignore the tremendous opportunity of the primary sector. Yes, there's a gestation period to get things in. You have to go through severe and a strong regulation, but that's fine. It actually is meant to keep the crap out. But it's actually a lot of good agricultural inputs as well as agricultural output from India that needs to kind of get the due attention. So do not forget the primary sector. I think that would be my don't.
Got your point loud and clear.
And my do would be the fact that we here in India, we have the CIIs at the Young Indians. We're very happy to collaborate with CII in the UK and other organizations. So make us your one-point contact in terms of trying to get the right advice, the right legislation, the right support from industry as well as from fellow entrepreneurs to actually get make a joint opportunity into the UK. So I think look at us as an opportunity and do not forget the primary sector.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that kind offer. I think we're definitely going to take up on that one, working alongside Lakshmi on the Young Indian side, definitely. Mr. Kumar, same question to you, sir. And I've been getting a lot of questions on the whole renewable energy sector. There was one particular question about some early stage technology companies in the renewable energy space in the UK looking for investments from India. They're asking how should they go about it, but I think we'll take that question offline. But just from your perspective on one do and one don't for an Indian investor looking to come to the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Iyer. The biggest do that I can say from my experience, have a good credible partner. We were fortunate to have Energy Pro Limited, and I think Dr. C. Fox is also here. Let me acknowledge that it was his being a great partner also helped. Let me just mention to the audience at large, I know I'm the only public sector representative here. Please don't write off public sector in India. This is the new India. You will see lot more from energy from the public sector. That's the tone. Please do not write us off. We have shown that we can do as much, if not better, than the private sector.
That's so very, very well said, sir. And we are definitely not going to write off the public sector. I think we can expect a lot more coming through from a lot of the Navratnas and some of the others as well. So looking forward to that, really. Thank you very much for that, sir. Lakshmi, one do and one don't from you. Very quickly. I'm just wary of the time. We are over the limit.
do keep an open mind. Do come to the UK and do also come to India. Keep talking to each other, keep exploring opportunities, and don't shy away, I think, is what I will say. Do look at the regions, both in India as well as the UK, and really keep an open mind. And please do write to us for help and support, both in India as well as in the UK.
Lakshmi, thank you very much for that. On that note, I've just seen that the clock has gone past 1 o'clock in the UK, or should I say 5:30 in India. It's time for everyone to go back home in India, evening time. So on that note, I'm going to thank all my esteemed speakers and my panelists. Thank you for taking the time out from all your busy schedules to be on this webinar. And to all our guests and attendees on this webinar, I hope you found this session useful, interesting, and enlightening, should I say, in that way. And hopefully it makes you take that decision and call in terms of looking at more such opportunities in the UK in a post-COVID world. And as all the speakers did say, do talk to us. You've got loads of support that is available from DIT, from CII, from Grant Thornton, both in UK and in India, to make your journey into the UK as smooth and steady as possible. So thank you for joining us all today on this session. From Grant Thornton, we've got Anuj from Grant Thornton UK and Pallavi from Grant Thornton India, who are our corridor experts. So do feel free to get in touch with them. And you can see a QR code on the screen. If you can scan it, you can download the India Means Britain Tracker report, or you will also get a link to this report when the recording of this session is shared with all of you. So thank you very much. I hope you found this session useful and interesting. Yeah, do keep safe and look forward to being in touch and talking to you all soon. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day ahead.